One of the most commonly held worldviews in the modern world is naturalism. In fact, it's often referred to as a modernist worldview. It is the idea that everything that exists is only physical, material objects. To the naturalists, there is absolutely nothing else. There is no supernatural. There are no ghosts, demons, gods, spirits, etc., etc. Even humans are purely physical, no souls. Because of secularism, naturalism has been able to become even more prevalent. The idea of secularism boils down to this. Religion is about personal experiences, feelings, and emotions. Keep your religion out of science and politics, but you can still be religious. It's easy to see this simple idea of separating your religion from parts of your life is a huge part of modern culture. It's important for our look into naturalism, as in 2007, atheists made about 7% of the U.S. population. And this is about what it was in the 1940s. There hasn't been a massive increase in outspoken atheists. But through secularism, our culture has embraced atheism and naturalism in many ways. In recent years, the fastest growing American religion is none of the above. For the most part, people are abandoning church and any specific religion, but not embracing atheism. Nevertheless, future generations of children will not attend church the way their parents did. A rise in atheism seems likely. What's more, a simple rise in secularism seems even more likely. Religion in America is becoming more wandering. People are wandering through different spiritual ideas and taking what seems best. Without the teaching of orthodox doctrine, we're likely to secularize more and more parts of our lives. What secularism also does is it allows people to believe in naturalism most of the day. Here's an example of how it works. I know a young man who enjoys watching wrestling. He began with the idea that it was all fake. He believed that every once in a while they get angry in the ring and they fight for real. Slowly over time, this young man began to think the times it got real happened more and more often. Today he thinks it's real most of the time and it's rarely fake. Secularism can grow like that too. When it does, that process is called secularization. Slowly over time, you consider your religious beliefs to be more and more irrelevant to your life. You see life from a naturalist worldview more and more. Hopefully by this point you can easily understand how naturalism is almost the air we breathe in modern culture. And as we promised, it's time to talk about how flawed of an idea it is. The first flaw has to do with you, me, and just people. To the naturalist, all humans are merely physical beings. In other words, you are not some soul or spirit that inhabits a body and will pass on to an afterlife. You are in reality only your body. When your body dies one day, then you simply do not exist because you are your body and your body is no more. To the naturalist, you do not use your brain, you are your brain. Where are your thoughts located? Where do your beliefs exist? They are in your brain. What this means is that all your ideas boil down to physical processes. To borrow from Michael Ramsden, "Darling, I love you" is really, "Darling, I'm having a chemical reaction." Your beliefs are a chemical reaction. So think of a chemical reaction you learned in chemistry class. How about the combination of sodium and chlorine, or perhaps hydrogen and oxygen, or maybe iron and oxygen? Do any of these chemical elements choose to bond and form salt, water, or rust? Well, if they did, then they wouldn't be merely physical elements. When we say naturalism, we mean that simply everything that happens is based on physical properties of material objects. Oxygen and hydrogen bond because of their chemical properties. So in a naturalist world, there is no such thing as choice. You don't choose what you do. The chemicals in your brain just reacted to cause it. In other words, you don't even choose what you think. You don't even choose what you believe to be true. If you don't choose what you think, then you don't control what you think. Therefore, how do you know if any of your beliefs are actually true or not? You don't. That's scary. It's especially scary for science. It's kind of important for scientists to be in control of their own thoughts, and especially honesty. Does it matter if cell phones cause cancer? In fact, this is an existential problem. Is your belief that it matters if cell phones cause cancer also just something caused by the chemicals? How do we know if anything is real? Some respond to this by saying that evolution proves that we can trust our own ability to think and still be naturalists. They argue that if our ancient ancestors believed a lion was really a chicken, then they would have died out. So the ancestors that believed the truth about the world were more likely to survive than the ones who did not, and therefore the ones who survived were our ancestors, and therefore we are more likely to believe the truth. So it's reason that we can trust our thoughts because of evolution. Now there's one giant glaring problem with this idea. It is an idea. It is caused by the chemical reactions too. This is circular reasoning. You believe that you can trust your thoughts you get from the chemicals in your brain because of a thought that you have from the chemicals in your brain. This is every bit as bad as saying the Bible is true because the Bible says so. What this means is that if naturalism is true, then nobody knows anything about anything. If you see this, then perhaps you're wondering about it. Do we really know anything? Is it possible to know anything for sure? Or should we doubt all claims of knowledge? If that's you, then let's talk about that. It's possible to know some things for sure. Total skepticism of all knowledge is something we can certainly debunk. If someone says that it's impossible to know anything for sure, then how does he know that for sure? How does he know for sure that he doesn't know anything for sure? Clearly he can't know for sure that he doesn't know anything for sure, because that would be a contradiction. So you can know for sure that the idea that total skepticism of all knowledge falls apart. You might wonder if the chemicals are still tricking you into seeing the contradiction. But the thing is that it doesn't matter. If the contradiction is an illusion, it doesn't matter. All you need to do is to observe the two ideas. You don't have to reason or deduce or logically infer. You don't have to observe the world beyond your mind. You just have to observe the two ideas. Idea 1 says that you can't know anything. Idea 2 says that you do know something. If you see those two ideas, then you see that they can't be true. And if we can prove with absolute certainty that we know things to be true, then we can also prove that naturalism cannot be true. If naturalism is true, then we can't know anything. Therefore, we can say with absolute certainty that humans are not merely physical beings. Humans are something more, something spiritual. Beyond that, there are other problems with naturalism. In a naturalist worldview, everything boils down to physical components. We call these molecules, atoms, elementary particles, etc. But we now know that these particles are formed of even smaller ones, protons, neutrons, electrons. What composes these particles is still a subject of investigation. Scientists are actually wondering if electrons are even particles at all. But for us, the question becomes this: are these particles composed of particles that are composed of particles, on and on forever? The short answer is absolutely not. If it goes on forever like that, then we run into a problem with infinity. That would mean that the world is made of an infinite number of things, which also happen to be infinitely small. Problems galore. This idea that the world is made of fundamental particles was first proposed by a man named Epicurus who lived centuries before Christ. He called these particles atoms. He claimed that the process called the swerve led to these particles forming into all things that exist, and he called this entire idea evolution. The problem is a mathematical one. Imagine that you have a barrel of apples that's infinitely large. Imagine that you give each apple a number from 1 to infinity. Take out all the odd numbered apples. How many did you take out? Infinity. How many are left? Infinity. So that means that infinity minus infinity is infinity? Or imagine that you take out all the apples. How many did you take out? Infinity. How many are left? None. So you can perform the same calculation and get two totally different numbers. What could be more different than 0 and infinity? In mathematics, this is considered a major problem. The most famous explanation of this problem is called Hilbert's Hotel, and the deduction is that it is logically impossible for an infinite number of things to exist. If so, then math would become meaningless, and 3 minus 2 would equal any number you like. For us, thousands of years after Christ, the question is a logical one. Remember our fundamental particle. If it does exist, if everything's made of physical particles, then there has to be a fundamental particle. Everything has to be made out of it. That would mean that the particle cannot fail to exist because reality cannot fail to exist. If it cannot fail to exist, then it is either infinitely old or it exists outside of time or timelessly or beyond time somehow. If it is infinitely old, then we run into the infinity problem all over again. We would have an infinite number of days before today. Well, how many days passed before the last 5 days? Infinity. How many passed before today? Infinity. So infinity minus infinity equals 5 and 1? Or does 5 equal 1? What this means is that the particle isn't infinitely old, but it also cannot fail to exist. Therefore, it would have to exist timelessly. It would have to transcend time somehow. It would be timeless. And there we run into even more problems. If that particle is timeless, then how is reality built out of it? Wouldn't reality be timeless too? A timeless reality is one that does not change. Since it's obvious that in our world things change, then reality is not built out of this particle. The simple summary is this: an existence composed of purely physical particles and processes is irrational and impossible. Naturalism cannot possibly be true, therefore naturalism is not. Without a doubt, many see the God of the gaps argument as the strongest argument in favor of naturalism. The easiest way to see how it works is with an example from history. Before Isaac Newton, scientists couldn't explain the orbits of the planets. They had no scientific laws that would describe gravity and how it might cause planets to orbit the sun. Newton made fantastic advances in physical theories. His theories of gravity were testable and passed experimental scrutiny. Furthermore, they predicted the orbits of the planets just as we observed them. But there was one problem. According to Newton's physical laws, the orbits of the planets would degrade over time and eventually crash into the sun. So why don't they crash into the sun? Newton theorized that there was no scientific explanation for this fact. So he concluded that he had found proof of God. He claimed this was scientific evidence for a miracle from God. God must come in and correct the orbits to keep them from crashing into the sun. But then a very boring thing happened, depending on your point of view. Later scientists found a way to explain why the orbits of the planets don't degrade in terms of laws of nature. New and better understandings of physical laws explained away this miracle of God. This example serves to demonstrate the God of the gaps argument. If we merely place God in the gaps of human scientific knowledge, then the advancement of science simply keeps eroding God. Soon, why would we need God at all? Furthermore, the belief in God becomes an opposition to scientific progress. No scientist would be motivated to do his or her work of discovery and trying to explain the universe. He or she could simply say that God did it, and therefore there cannot be an explanation for it. The problem for a scientist is this is existential. How do you exist as a scientist and also believe in God? How can you go to work and also believe that something that subverts all your work? How can you live like this? The faith one has in God is at the heart of all that that person cares about. It brings this person the most meaning of all, and yet it somehow subverts the very pursuit of knowledge that science is. If you're having one of these existential dilemmas over belief in God or the life of a scientist, then please keep watching, because there is help. Although it may seem to be the case, belief in God is not a problem for science at all. Well, hold on, that's not entirely true. It makes a difference which God you believe in. As others have written, it's ridiculous to take the religions of the world as some giant problem to hate. The religions of the world could not be more different in what they believe or teach. For the God of the Gaps debate, the difference between polytheism, the belief in many gods, and monotheism, the belief in, or in many cases, the worship of only one God, could not be more different. Now, our ancestors believed in many gods, and these gods did not get along. They usually battled out their differences between humans, using wars and conflicts between humans to battle out their differences. Since the wars of the gods, the theogonies, were usually too devastating and destructive. So they always gave magic assistance to humans they favored. These gods did not get along with each other. They had different plans and agendas, and what one god set in motion in the world was soon subverted by another, and then it would be returned. In such a world, clearly science would be a limited endeavor. Who knows if a god did it? And who knows which God did it? On the other hand, Christian monotheism could not have been more different. Think of it like this. An engineer builds a car. The person puts all the effort and careful planning into the car that's possible. A fantastic job is done. The better the car is designed, the better it works. This means that it will need less repairs. But even a better engineer would design it even better. It would need even less repairs. There would be even less mistakes. So here's the question. What if an all-powerful, all-knowing God designed the car? How well would it run then? How long before it would need repairs? Obviously, God's designs would never need corrections. So the scientist who does his or her work would really need to ask one question. How great is God? A greatest possible God would need to correct the creation as little as possible. In fact, this God would really need only to create it and just watch it run as he always intended. Everything would take place just as he planned it, without any need for corrections. Nothing would happen that wasn't according to the only God's plan. Therefore, if you really believe in this God, then you would want to explain everything we do, not yet understand, in terms of the way the world was made. You would want to understand the plan and design of the world. In fact, you would find knowledge of how the world works to be sacred knowledge. It would be a glimpse into the mind of God Himself, it would be a way of understanding and finding God. Even a little bit. God in the Bible is the ultimate object of worship. The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Deuteronomy 6. Therefore, scientists who are obedient to this biblical commandment are strongly motivated to seek out new explanations and understandings of the universe, since when they do, they are growing closer to God Himself, the object of ultimate love and reverence. We never really understand God's plans. That's why the knowledge is so sacred. Because of such blatant and inescapable reasons, we can say unreservedly that naturalism is not true, and one would be wise to believe in the supernatural. Even as you listen to me now, the words come from something supernatural, me. The non-physical self has ideas and thoughts to communicate, and so I have to vibrate my vocal cords and send those vibrations through the air. I have to translate that which is immaterial into something material so that you can receive it, and then you can translate it back into the immaterial idea for yourself. The physical part of the journey is actually just a middle leg through which the non-physical things, us, interact. That which the naturalists claim is all there is a tool in the toolbox of the things that they don't believe in.